Let's get some more on all of this. Republican Congressman Will Hurd is joining us. He's a member of both the Intelligence and Homeland Security Committees, former clandestine CIA operative. He was just in that briefing on North Korea. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Wolf, it's always great to be on.
So did you learn anything new about North Korea's nuclear missile capabilities?
Well, what I learned is that this White House and President Trump has the resolve to deal with the North Korean issue, no matter how difficult it is, and that they're going to use all the levers of national power, diplomatic, military, intelligence, and economic, to deal with this issue. And they're also interested in working more and testing assumptions about whether China will work with us against the threat of North Korea. I was recently in South Korea and went to the demilitarized zone between South and North Korea, and it's clear to me that Kim Jung Un, is going to stop at nothing to get an intercontinental ballistic missile, and we got to be prepared for that eventuality.
So what about the administration's position on military options? They say all options are on the table, but here's the question. Is a preemptive military strike realistic?
I think the realistic scenario right now is to work with a number of our partners across the world and make them realize that North Korea is a global problem, not just a problem on the Korean peninsula, and also to work with China. The majority of trade to North Korea comes through China, and China has a number of tools where they can help tighten up sanctions around North Korea and make the North Korean dictator rethink some of his strategies.
But are they doing that, the Chinese? We're getting mixed indications.
Well, the Chinese have always been a difficult partner when it comes to North Korea, and I think they are coming to the realization that Kim Jong Un is more of a threat to China than a U.S., a South Korean alliance. And we also have to remember that the South Koreans are currently in a special election for the president, and that president is going to get named in a couple of weeks. And as the day after the election happens, the president's going to take over, and that means a South Korean president that's likely to have a different perspective on North Korea than their two previous predecessors.
Well, when you say the Chinese feel threatened, do they really feel threatened by whom?
They recognize that Kim Jong Un, or I believe they're starting to recognize that Kim Jong Un, the dictator of North Korea, is creating problems, and that a flare-up, any kind of activity there would put pressures on their borders. And I think the Chinese are coming to that realization. And guess what? We got to continue to push them to come to that, and we got to be working with other allies around the world on this common threat, because North Korea is one of the few places that they could potentially kill tens of millions of people within 12 to 13 minutes. And that's a real threat, not only to our friends in South Korea and Japan and the U.S. homeland. That's a threat to the world. Yeah,
it's the most dangerous spot on earth right now. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Let me shift gears, Congressman, talk about the other breaking news we're following. Do you support President Trump's tax cut proposals, the initial proposal to cut business tax rates from 35% to 15%? I ask the question because a lot of economists think that that will dramatically increase the national debt and the deficit.
Well, the Trump tax plan just came out today. I haven't had the chance to review it in detail. One of the things that Republicans have been saying for a long time is simplification of the tax code. We also should bring our corporate tax rate down. What we're able to bring it down to, that's going to be a subject of debate and conversation. But having the highest tax bracket in the world is not good for our economy. It's not good for jobs. But we also got to make sure that the average American, the middle class, keeps a little bit more of their money, and they're able to invest it in their family and spend it themselves rather than sending it to Washington, D.C. And so I think this is going to be an issue over the next weeks and months. There's going to be a lot of debate here in Washington, D.C. to figure out how we can simplify our tax code in order to get our economy humming.
On health care, another issue that's out there today, could there realistically be a House vote to repeal and replace Obamacare this week before Saturday's 100 days in office? And if so, how will you vote?
Well, Wolf, your guess is as good as mine. There have been a lot of conversations on health care and where we go forward and how we do it. I don't know if we are ready to move forward with a vote this week, and it's hard for me to say, well, I'll stand, because until I see the specifics of a plan, it's hard to make a decision. But ultimately, what I want to make sure and that we're doing is that we're increasing access to and decreasing costs of health care. That should be our goal, and both sides of the political aisle agree to that.
As you know, the president backed off putting funding, at least a down payment, $1.4 billion for his proposed border wall with Mexico in this temporary spending bill that's got to be approved before Friday night. But he also vowed that the wall is going to get built. You've said it's impossible to build a physical wall. So should this wall be built, should American taxpayer dollars be spent for it?
Wolf, we've had this conversation many times. Building a wall from sea to shining sea is the most expensive and least effective way to do border security. With 2,000 miles of the border between the U.S. and Mexico, I have 820 of those miles. We should be investing in technology. We should be investing in more people along the border. We need to have a defense in depth. There's parts of the border where Border Patrol's response time is measured in hours to days. If your response time is measured in hours to days, a wall is not a physical barrier. We need to be able to detect incursions onto our border. We need to be able to follow it, and then we need to be able to deploy our most important resource, our human resources, the men and women in Border Patrol. And also, we could increase the amount of intelligence that we're collecting on the 19 criminal organizations operating in Mexico and Central America. And one of the metrics we should be looking at about whether our border is secure or not is, are we seeing a decrease in folks coming across the border illegally? Are we seeing less drugs coming into our country? Those are the metrics we should be using to determine whether our border is secure, not whether we have a concrete structure on every mile.
Congressman Will Hurd of Texas, as usual, thank you very much for joining us.
Wolf, it's always a pleasure, man.
Just ahead, I'll speak